they stood alone, with ideas that changed everything. Brilliant minds against the world then.
Welcome to your dose of wowness. Look around you. If there is a phone in the room, a laptop, a tablet, a GPS device, a Bluetooth speaker, a wireless router, any of those things, every single one of them uses a communications principle called frequency hopping spread spectrum. It is the reason your Wi-Fi signal is hard to intercept. It is the reason your Bluetooth headphones work in a room full of other wireless signals. It is one of the foundational technologies of the modern connected world. The person who invented it was, at the time she invented it, the most famous actress in Hollywood. The studio that employed her had no idea she was doing it. The patent she filed expired before a single commercial product was built on it. She received nothing. Her name was Hedy Lamarr, and the world knew her as a face. It should have known her as an engineer.
You see, the gap between what you've been told Hedy Lamarr was and what she was actually doing with her mind, it's absolutely staggering. Look, Louis B. Mayer signs her to MGM and famously brands her the most beautiful woman in the world. And the entire Hollywood machine of the 1940s just builds this image of her as pure surface, right? But it was a complete fiction. Beneath that exotic European beauty label you were sold was this intensely capable, totally hidden technical intellect. Day 7 of 10, we have been in a Viennese maternity ward, a Buckinghamshire country house, a King's College laboratory, a Baltimore street, a Louisiana sharecropper shack, and a New York hotel room. Today we are in a Hollywood home laboratory, and the person working in it is the most photographed woman in America. Subscribe. The next 3 explainers finish with this arc started.
So where does that kind of technical genius even come from? Well, she was born Hedwig Kiesler in Vienna, and she just had this relentless, restless curiosity from day one. But her real education, and this is wild, her unintended education in weapons and communications happened when she was 19. She married Friedrich Fritz Mondel. Now, this guy was an Austrian arms manufacturer, massively wealthy, deeply, terribly controlling. He essentially kept her in a state of gilded captivity. He took her to dinners where the guests were weapons engineers and defense procurement officials from across Europe. He expected her to be decorative and quiet. She was quiet. She was also listening with a precision and a retention that he almost certainly did not credit her with, and she remembered everything. A decade later, she used it.
You can imagine the sheer willpower it took, but she eventually escaped that coercive nightmare. She makes it to London, then straight to Hollywood, lands the massive MGM contract, changes her name to Hedy Lamarr, and boom, instant global fame. But the studio system? They completely ignored her brain. They cast her strictly as an object to look at, which drove her absolutely crazy. So what does she do? She builds a totally secret second existence. Literally, right behind closed doors, she sets up a private laboratory in her home. We're talking drafting tools, heavy engineering reference materials, the whole shebang. While the studio suits are losing sleep over her lighting and her makeup, she is sitting at home, between film shoots, actively solving complex technical engineering problems.
Now, when the Second World War hits, she wants to do way more than just act. So she applies to join the National Inventors Council. That's the government body evaluating civilian inventions for the military. The National Inventors Council told her that her most valuable contribution to the war effort was selling war bonds. She had raised $7 million in a single evening doing that, so they were not wrong. They were also not right. In her spare room, she was working on something that would eventually be worth rather more than $7 million. She just would not be around to collect it.
Put yourself in that spare room for a second. The specific problem she's obsessing over, it is quite literally a matter of life and death. At the time, radio-guided torpedoes were showing incredible promise, but they had this massive, fatal flaw. They transmitted their guidance signal on one single fixed radio frequency, meaning if an enemy ship spots that frequency, they just jam it with a countersignal. The torpedo goes blind, it loses control. This wasn't some theoretical issue. This was a documented operational weakness costing the Allies actual lives and battles. So, pulling from everything she absorbed during those suffocating dinners with her ex-husband's weapons engineers, Lamarr sets out to eliminate this vulnerability entirely. And her solution? It's nothing short of brilliant. She realizes the torpedo's receiver and the ship's transmitter shouldn't just sit on one frequency. Instead, what if they continuously hop between multiple frequencies, right? And they do it in a synchronized, pseudo-random sequence. Just think about the nightmare this creates for the enemy. Imagine you're the enemy trying to jam a signal, but by the time you locate it, the signal has already moved on. To actually jam it, you would have to blast the entire radio spectrum at the exact same time, which back then was computationally and technically impossible. It is a perfect concept. But she hits a wall. There's a missing link.
How on earth do you keep the torpedo and the ship perfectly synchronized out in the ocean without sending out a coordinating signal that the enemy could just jam anyway?
The answer comes from, honestly, the most unexpected place imaginable. Sometime around 1940, Lamarr is at a Hollywood dinner party and she meets a guy named George Antheil. Now, Antheil was this avant-garde American composer, and this is where things get really wild. If you are watching this on Wi-Fi right now, and you almost certainly are, comment frequency hop. You are sitting inside the technology this explainer is about. Stay with us because we are about to explain exactly how it works and why a composer who wrote music for player pianos was the person who helped solve the problem.
Okay, so get this. Antheil's most famous musical composition actually required multiple mechanical player pianos to play the exact same rhythmic patterns at the exact same time. How did he pull that off? He used synchronized punched paper rolls. He had spent literally years figuring out how to keep multiple mechanical devices perfectly on program without any external coordination. When Lamarr pitches him her frequency hopping idea, it clicks. Antheil realizes his paper piano rolls are the exact physical mechanism her torpedoes need. So they sit down, they design a shared, pre-programmed sequence that both the ship and the torpedo read simultaneously. In 1941, they file U.S. Patent 222.38.7 for a secret communication system. And then, they just gift it. Hand it straight to the National Inventors Council to help win the war.
But the military? They don't bite at all. The Navy just dismisses the whole thing, telling her the mechanism is way too complex and bulky to stuff inside a torpedo. The patent was granted in August of 1942. U.S. patents at the time lasted 17 years. That meant the clock ran out in 1959. For the patent to have paid her anything, the technology needed to be commercially deployed before that date. The Navy had said it was impractical, so the clock ran. And the military reinvented the same technology in classified research a few years later, deployed it without reference to her patent, and by the time Wi-Fi was built on her principle in the 1990s, she had been owed nothing for 30 years.
1959. You have to feel the sheer cruelty of that timing, because there wasn't some grand villain here, you know? Nobody was twirling a mustache and sabotaging her work. It was just the cold, grinding procedural indifference of a patent system running down a strict clock. Once that clock struck midnight in August 1959, her brilliant, world-changing idea was suddenly free for anyone to use. And the kicker? Shortly after, right in the early 1960s around the Cuban Missile Crisis, the military actually starts actively deploying spread-spectrum communications for the exact jam-resistant purposes she had pitched them. But that legal window for her to get a single cent for her genius, it had just slammed firmly shut.
And as the commercial world caught up, the scale of what she gave us became staggering. Just look at the infrastructure you rely on every single day. The IEEE 802.11 Wi-Fi standard, it relies squarely on her frequency hopping principles. Commercial Bluetooth uses it as its core transmission method. GPS signal integrity, cellular networks, they are all built right on top of this foundation. We are talking about a $1 trillion global infrastructure, the absolute backbone of your modern connected life. The industries that built themselves on her private, home laboratory invention made absolute fortunes. But Lamarr's financial return for altering the trajectory of global communications? Zero. Not one dime. It actually wasn't until the 1990s that researchers finally started tracing the lineage of this massive tech back to a 1942 patent filed by a Hollywood star and a piano composer. In 1997, 55 years after the patent was filed, an organization called the Electronic Frontier Foundation gave her an award for her contribution to communications technology. She was 82 years old. She accepted it by telephone from her home in Florida. Her response, depending on which account you read, was some version of, "It is about time." She was not wrong about that either. Hedy Lamarr died in January of 2000 in Castleberry, Florida. Her ashes were scattered in the Vienna woods. Because she had never entirely stopped being the girl from Vienna who took apart music boxes to understand how they worked. She was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame 14 years after her death. The Wi-Fi standard that your phone is using right now was built on her principle. The Bluetooth connection carrying audio to your headphones was built on her principle. The GPS signal that told you where to turn this morning was built on her principle. None of it paid her a cent. The world built itself on her idea and called her beautiful and moved on. Tomorrow the arc makes its sharpest turn yet, away from the laboratories and the patent offices and the Hollywood studios, to a 14-year-old in Malawi with a library book and a pile of scrap metal, who decided that if the grid would not come to his village, he would build one himself. We will see you then.